I don't know if I am on or not. This is something that okay. I heard a beep. Does that mean I'm on? These are things that Pastor Chad should not be left alone to try and figure out. Okay, I think I'm on. We're going to try this again. I apologize for the technical difficulties. I don't imagine that we will have seen the end of them. I imagine there will be more. Here, let me do me a favor if you're watching and make a little comment. I'm trying to figure out, once again. Diane, thank you. You're a savior. Not the savior, of course. I appreciate you. Okay, we're going to continue. We're going to try this one more time. It's going to be round 2. I don't know if there will be a round 3 if it goes again. But I got a little laptop here, and we're going to try this again. My phone just died on me. My phone said, that's it. That's all I got. That's not bad. Okay, we're going round 2. Hey, Rick, good to see you. This actually might be better because I got my little laptop here. I can see people actually writing. Okay, I'm just gonna rewind a little bit. We're talking about the Mormon Church today, the Latter-day Saints, and because it's July, and I like to offend people in July, so we're getting into some controversial topics. Mormon Church, where does it come from? Comes from a guy named Joseph Smith, born in the 1800s, lived in New York, was a treasure hunter. Used a little divining rod to look for treasure. He claims that he got a visit from the angel Moroni, who showed him where some secret golden, called golden plates, but it's really a book with golden pages. Well, who knows what it was? Nobody has this nowadays. But the angel Moroni said, hey, dig in this hill, the hill Cumorah, and you'll find this. Joseph Smith said he did that, and he translated this kind of magnificent history of America that nobody knew about the Nephites and the Lamanites, and how they had come over from Israel. These are Israelite tribes that lived in America. And the Lamanites eventually destroyed the Nephites and become what we now call the Native Americans. So, here's where we left off. Now, the thing about the Book of Mormon, I think where we left off, I can't remember, I don't know exactly when the video crashed. The thing about the Book of Mormon is, Joseph Smith said, before the Nephites were destroyed, Jesus, we'll just pretend that's Jesus, forgive me, Jesus. Jesus, after he was killed in Jerusalem, appeared in America to these guys and kind of preached the gospel in America. And this is the thing that really excited people about the Book of Mormon and Joseph Smith back in the 1800s, and I think probably still today, is this, wow, there's a lost revelation of Jesus Christ. And the Book of Mormon is even called Another Testament. Remember I was talking about testaments and the importance of that. The importance of that. We have the Old Testament, the New Testament. Joseph Smith says, aha, now here's another testament of Jesus. Now, here's where I think we ought to take some issues as Christ followers, that we have to be really leery about this idea that someone can come and claim that there's even another testament of Jesus Christ. Joseph Smith got a bunch of followers after this Book of Mormon was published. He left, where'd my marker go? He left New York and kind of wandered around. He went to Missouri, ended up, and as he's going, he's getting all sorts of followers, people that are following him. And it's a fascinating history, the Mormon Church. He was, at one point, he ran for president. He had his own militia. He set up himself as mayor in all these towns. He's got, quite a massive following. Very interesting history. And again, the dangerous thing, in my opinion, about the Book of Mormon isn't so much this kind of make-believe history that he came up with, but it's this idea that Joseph Smith can give us new revelations. That's the thing that we should be worried about. This is, I mean, it's not true, but it's not very harmful. This idea that there's these tribes in America, and, whatever. Like I said, it's not true, but it's not maybe very harmful, at least to my mind. What is harmful is somebody saying that they have additional revelation that we need from God. Now, is that possible? Could people get new revelation from God? Well, I would think we would say, sure, yeah. I mean, people can get information from God, but what will happen if you're getting real revelation from God is that whatever revelation you're getting, maybe revelation is the wrong word, it needs to be built on the foundation that has already been laid, right? It's actually one of the ways you can tell if someone is to be trustworthy or not, is if here's this foundation of Christ and the apostles, right? The teachings of Christ. If what they're saying, it can be built on this foundation, okay, good. I think that's what we should all be striving for. But if someone comes and says, I've got a revelation that is over here, or kind of overturns some kind of prior revelation, then you say, well, wait a second here. You can't, it would have to be built on that revelation. You can't overturn a prior revelation. Hopefully that makes sense. But at this point in the history, let's kind of just keep looking at the history. Joseph Smith has a bunch of followers, and he says he continues to get more and more revelations from God. Now he's calling himself a prophet, and aside from the Book of Mormon that he's translated, they also in Mormon scriptures, I guess they consider them scriptures, they have the Doctrine and Covenants. This is kind of Joseph Smith's teachings. Now, one of the teachings, and maybe the one they're kind of infamous for, is this the idea of polygamy, that you can be married to multiple wives. This is Joseph Smith starts getting revelations that he needs to be married to all these other women, which is it was kind of a bummer for his wife at the time. She wasn't a big fan of this, but if her husband's saying he's getting revelations from God that he's got to marry this other lady, that's kind of how it is. And he marries a bunch of ladies. It's hard to know. Nobody knows the exact count, but maybe around 30, let's say. He marries about 30 people, 30 women, and girls. Some of them are very young. And again, he has permission to do this because he's saying that God is giving him these revelations as him being the prophet. Again, he gets another more, people are following him. They're very interested in this. He ends up in Illinois, and is that where Illinois is? That's Indiana. No, that's Illinois. Wait a second. Sorry, my geography's a little bit off. Let's just say that's Illinois. There's a traveling salesman who has got some papyrus, some old ancient papyrus, and some people bring it to Joseph Smith, and Joseph Smith translates this old papyrus, and lo and behold, this old papyrus that this guy's selling is a history of Moses and Abraham. And so he says, well, I've got some more scriptures for you guys now. We've got, they just kind of, the Mormon church kind of lumps it in a book called The Pearl of Great Price. This kind of additional histories of Moses and Abraham and everybody. Somehow Joseph Smith ended up with it, he says, and he's translated it. And it's, again, more stuff about the Book of Mormon. So all these things, along with the Bible, the Joseph Smith and Mormons to this day will all consider this all Scripture. These kind of the four things here, not just the Bible, but the Book of Mormon, the Doctrine and Covenants, and the Pearl of Great Price. So it's some stories about Abraham and Moses. In Illinois, a little town called Nauvoo, he sets himself up as mayor of the town. The people in the town dislike the Mormons being there, and the press of the town, the paper, prints out in articles against Joseph Smith. Joseph Smith's upset about this. He has the paper shut down. There's a revolt, and Joseph Smith's thrown in prison, and then there's a riot on the prison, and Joseph Smith gets killed. The Mormons then leave Illinois, head over to Utah, which was not a state yet. Wait, is that the shape of Utah? I don't know where the nub of Utah is. If it's maybe the nub's on this side. You'll forgive me. I don't know what side the nub of Utah is. I think that's right. Anyway, they end up settling in Utah, where there's tons of Mormons to this day. It's kind of their headquarters. In fact, there's so many Mormons in Utah, you can't hold like public office unless you're a Mormon. Like, you just won't get voted in. I don't think there's ever been a governor in Utah that has not been a Mormon up until today. It's kind of where they're at. And they were following a guy named Brigham Young. If you ever heard Brigham Young, or Brigham Young University, or the Mormon Tabernacle Choir, it's all that stuff. So after Joseph Smith died, they followed Brigham Young, and he continued the receiving revelations and stuff, and all sorts of, well, if I could say nonsense, all sorts of nonsense. Now, what's the deal with all this stuff? What is all this stuff saying? Well, there's some very... the Book of Mormon itself, it contains this kind of weird history, this alternate history of what happened in America. But inside the Book of Mormon, there's not a lot of things that are theologically... It's just kind of an interesting story. Where you get kind of the weird theology is in the Doctrine and Covenants and the Pearl of Great Price. Because obviously, as he's getting revelation about multiple wives, and let me go back to the multiple wives thing. Because a lot of people will, even to this day, kind of accuse the Latter-day Saints or the Mormons of polygamy and all this stuff. They don't practice polygamy anymore. Why not? Well, they kind of hightailed it to Utah before Utah was a state, and that way they can continue to practice their polygamy. Is one of the reasons they had to leave the states. Is polygamy is not legal in America. I don't think it still is. I don't think it is anymore. Who knows what they say is legal anymore? But anyway, they can practice it here in Utah. Well, eventually Utah becomes a state, and the president at the time says, "Hey, listen, you Mormons," and this is, I'm not exaggerating. This is what happened. If you don't knock off polygamy, you can't become a state, because polygamy is illegal in America. Now, they wanted to become a state, so the prophet of the church at the time, he says he got another revelation from God that says, hey, you stop practicing polygamy. And that was kind of a convenient revelation, and so they no longer practice polygamy. They haven't practiced polygamy for a long time. So it's not good to accuse them of polygamy. I'm just giving you the history of it. But anyway, that's why they don't do it anymore. They wanted to become a state, and they couldn't do it if they kept on doing that stuff. Now, you get some Mormon sects that still practice polygamy, kind of offshoots, and to those offshoots' credit, they're just trying to follow Joseph Smith as best they can. I mean, that's what Joseph Smith did. But anyway, the official position is that we don't practice polygamy anymore, again, in the Mormon Church. Okay, let's look at this real quick before we close up here, because I want to at least talk about, and again, this is going to be controversial, because if there's any Mormons watching, forgive me, or Latter-day Saints or whatever, forgive me, but here's a couple issues with this whole thing. Maybe you could say issue number one: this whole history, everything that this book is based on, didn't happen. If you know about the Native Americans and where they came from, maybe you learned this in school. Back in the Ice Age or something like that, people came from over here in Asia and crossed the Bering Strait when it was icy and kind of settled in the Americas that way. That's where, I mean, when you do genetic studies on Native Americans, which I haven't done, but when scientists do them, they're able to trace where the genes come from, and they all come from where everybody has always thought they come from. They're not Israelite genes. Native Americans aren't descended from the Israelites, I guess is what I'm saying. Didn't happen. All the stuff that's written in the Book of Mormon, Joseph Smith writes about, like, horses and battle, and they had metal coins and all this stuff. The Native Americans didn't have any of that stuff. I don't know if you knew this, but horses weren't introduced into the New World until the Europeans came. Joseph Smith didn't know that, but so he just wrote about all these things there. But none of the history of the Book of Mormon actually took place. And there's a lot of excuses and things that Mormons will give to explain why it really did take place, but no historian really takes it seriously. So I guess that's one issue you could take with it, is all the stuff in the Book of Mormon didn't actually happen. You could say, well, where did this thing come from? The Book of Mormon. He dug it out of this hill here, and after he was done with it, Joseph Smith said he buried the plates again. So we can't really we don't have it. We don't have the stuff. All we have is what Joseph Smith said he got. But it's really just Joseph Smith writing it down. If you would like to dig up in that hill and try to find this, you're not going to be able to. The Mormon Church owns all that land. They've done excavations in that hill. There's a big Mormon church there. But if they did find it, they didn't tell anybody. They're not telling anybody. My suspicion is it's not there. It's just made up, all make believe. So the history is all make believe. The theology, there's big problems with the theology. So, like I said, the Mormon Church would not hold to the creeds the way all the other churches do. So Jesus Christ, we understand Jesus is the second person of the Trinity. The Mormons would say Jesus is the Son of God, but he's not God. So the idea in Mormon theology is God at some point was a man, like a flesh and blood man. I don't know if it's flesh and blood, but some kind of man. He wasn't always God. He became God. And we are creations of God, but God was at one point some kind of creature. And if you follow all the Mormon scriptures and do all the Mormon things the way you're supposed to, you, a human, can also become a god. And in they call it the telestial heaven, you will be your own god over your own creation. That's kind of the goal of the Mormon Church. So the Mormons will say, as man is, so God once was. As God is, so man one day will be. Which is like it's a really horrible theology. This idea that we can become God and that God was once one of us. It's something. So not only is it bad history, but the theology is very, very, I don't want to say problematic because it's worse than problematic. It's the right word is heresy. It's a heretical. It's a heresy. You can read about that stuff in the Doctrine and Covenants if you're interested in it. My suggestion would be don't worry about it. If a prophet's coming and saying something other than what all the prophets and Jesus Christ himself said, it's an easy way to say, oh no, that's not a real, I'm not going to follow that prophet. It's a false prophet. That's what I would say anyway. Again, this is a controversial July, so I'm going to say that Joseph Smith's a false prophet. Now, not anything against the Latter-day Saints themselves. You know, they'll come to your door and they'll knock and they'll explain. They won't explain it the way I explained it, but they'll explain it in their own way. Those people, by and large, are great people. Like if you had Latter-day Saint as your neighbor, that's like the best neighbor you could ask for. They're really wholesome people. In my opinion, maybe that's being stereotypical, but in my opinion, they're really wholesome, down to earth folks. What's the problem? Not anything with the Latter-day Saints themselves, but with who they're following. It's unfortunate, but I would be saying you'd be following a false prophet if you went down that path. Not only is the history untrue, but the stuff he's teaching is not the stuff that Christ and his church have always taught. And it's very dangerous to put your soul entrust your soul into one person. Like I said, especially with a person with the history of this person and who has not been shown that he can even properly translate things. In fact, the Egyptian papyrus that became part of their scriptures was found a couple decades ago, and people didn't know how to translate Egyptian back when Joseph Smith was around. This was before the what was that? What's that thing called where you can? They learned how to read hieroglyphics because of the Rosetta Stone. It was before the Rosetta Stone, but afterward, now we know how to read hieroglyphics, so we can actually go back and read the manuscript that Joseph Smith was translating, and we can prove, you can see that he didn't translate it at all right. Everything that he said was a story about Moses and Abraham was really just it's a Egyptian burial text about the god Horus. So he doesn't know how to translate. He's making up history, and he's giving bad theology. All good reasons to not entrust your immortal soul into Joseph Smith. This idea, that tempting idea, very tempting idea that we can become God. It's very tempting, but remember, that's the original temptation from the serpent. That's the thing the serpent said to human beings, that, hey, if you eat this fruit from this tree, you can become like God. Hey, let's stay away from that kind of temptation. Let's stay away from that kind of teaching, and just stick with the foundational stuff. So that's my thoughts. Let's see if we got any questions or anything. Yeah, well, anyway, if you got any questions, put them there. I can address them. Like I said, we're going to take some controversial topics on Whiteboard Wednesdays here in July. So here's the first one. Sorry if it upset you, but you got to call it like it is. And we will see you next Wednesday. In fact, we'll see you Sunday. This Sunday, we're starting maybe a controversial sermon series, what the Bible doesn't say, or the Bible doesn't say that. So we're going to be looking at some kind of popular slogans that some people think are in the Bible but aren't actually in the Bible. Should be fun. We'll see you then. Let's see if I can stop this crazy thing. Jane, stop this crazy thing.